Good morning everyone. You're all very welcome to our next session of our Public Library Section online conference. A World in Change, Libraries Survive and Thrive. I'm delighted to introduce you to our speaker today, Krystal Vittles, and she's the Head of Service Delivery in Suffolk Libraries in the UK. Krystal oversees 44 libraries, 3 mobile libraries and 10 prison libraries, along with being a chair of a number of boards and a trustee of a local literacy charity. To say that her brief is enormous is putting it mildly. Krystal's talk today is entitled Libraries in Lockdown, the Ultimate Page Turner. And Krystal will give us an idea of how Suffolk Libraries dealt with the COVID pandemic and adapted and thrived during that time, much like we did ourselves in Ireland. Some of you may remember that last October Krystal published an article in The Guardian, and it basically said that libraries were waiting on a plot twist like COVID to come along to highlight how valuable they were and are in the community. And I'll just quote a line from the article. It seems that libraries didn't just speak up, but nigh on shouted out during lockdown, and we are determined to maintain this noise as the country begins to reopen. And I think all of us, along with Krystal, are looking forward to a nice, new, exciting chapter within the public libraries in service in Ireland. So enjoy Krystal's talk.
Hello everybody, my name is Krystal Vittles and I'm the Head of Service Delivery for Suffolk Libraries in England. I'm a librarian by qualification and training, and I started my career in school libraries and local authority roles, but I've now been in public libraries for almost 8 years now. So librarian is a name I wear proudly at all times, but looking back on this past year, it's something which sparkles a little brighter for me, and I'm really proud of what we've collectively achieved. I'd love to be with you live today, but given I live in a very rural area with an almost criminal broadband connection, we decided I shouldn't risk it. As you can see, I'm recording this from my home office, as libraries in England are still mostly closed down due to our latest lockdown measures. In an ideal world, I'd be actually stood at a podium, given a far more professional talk with pictures and slides. But if this past year has taught me anything, I can improvise well and still connect with people, even if it is digitally. I have sent through a pack of info over to the digital conference organisers, which is available to you all should you wish to have a look at this afterwards, and this will give you a flavour of what I've spoken about today. So to give you a little bit of context to start us off, Suffolk is a large rural county in the east of England with approximately 750,000 people, give or take, and in Suffolk we have 44 static libraries, we have 3 mobiles, we have 2 pop-up libraries, and I also oversee 10 prison libraries which are dotted around England. Our service is incredibly wide, as in addition to this, we also have some major contracts, one of which is the prisons, but we also have a really, really big mental health and wellbeing service, which we're commissioned for. And we're also a national portfolio organisation with Arts Council England, which means that we deliver really great creative services as well. So we reach a good proportion of the population in Suffolk, and pre-pandemic, we had somewhere around 3 million visits a year. So we also have about 400 colleagues working across the organisation, with the majority of these being frontline in libraries. An important piece of information for you all to be aware of is that Suffolk Libraries is an independent organisation, and we became the first library mutual when we spun out from local authority nearly 10 years ago. The best way to describe us is a cooperative, and we are kind of owned by our members who are drawn from each of our libraries friends groups. It was a risky model, as it had never been done before, but 29 out of 44 libraries were under the threat of closure in 2011, and so a third wave was born. And I'm really happy to say that, as of saying this, all 44 are still thriving and are overseen by trained, paid professional library staff. So don't get me wrong, being independent has its challenges, but our freedom has allowed us to innovate and try new things that would perhaps come just a little bit slower under local authority model in England. It was actually this ability to be agile which forms the basis of what I'm going to talk about today, and our experiences in Suffolk of delivering a public library service during a global pandemic. So I want to share with you some stories, some insights of our experiences, but hopefully keep my gripes to a minimum, because I won't lie, this past year has been really tough going. It has been one of surprising joys, lots of gentle laughter, and I know this will resonate with everyone listening today. This has actually been built on a bit of a foundation of sadness and worry that we've had to work from. So as the head of service delivery, I run library operations, and so I was tasked with ensuring we still had an offer for our communities despite being completely closed at the end of March 2020. This meant working fast and actually thinking even faster from the moment we knew libraries would close. It was incredibly startling and bewildering, but luckily, actually, we didn't have too much time to really think or dwell, as we had no choice but to act fast. And looking back on this past year, one of the things which surprises me, but also doesn't surprise me, is how we put everything in place so quickly. So public libraries have long been innovative, and I felt we really came into our own during this crisis. So I want to start kind of this telling of our libraries in lockdown with a quick story to set the tone, and it's one of my favourite stories of the past year, and it's actually directly related to our lockdown experiences. It was an ordinary day, and I had popped into Ipswich County Library, which is our largest library in our county town. I was there to have a quick catch up with a colleague, and I just happened to overhear a few of my Ipswich colleagues discussing who was recording the next chapter of a book for a customer. I should clarify, this was in June when libraries were preparing to reopen a little for the first time, which is why I was on site and why my colleagues were on site. So I was really intrigued by what I'd overheard. And so I just asked a very few gentle questions. And what I gleaned from my colleagues is they had been talking to a 102-year-old library user, Doris, over the phone as part of our Suffolk Lifeline service. She had mentioned to a colleague a book that her dad used to read to her and how she missed it as she couldn't read anymore. And so she relied on spoken words rather than the written word because her eyes had really started to go. And she often spoke about one particular book, which was called Portrait of Claire by Frances Brett Young. So my really, really wonderful colleagues hatched a scheme without being asked to record this book for her, as it wasn't available as an audiobook. In fact, it wasn't even available in print anymore, so they had to hunt it down outside our usual channels. And they were taking it in turns to record a chapter and hand these over to her regularly. I just happened to offhandedly tweet about this story, so I just thought it was lovely and I like to tweet about these things, and it went viral, which I didn't expect, and it was picked up by BBC News, and my colleagues were on breakfast television. And, you know, it was a really adorable, heartwarming story. But at its core, I think it's actually a reflection of the values and motivations of people who work in public libraries. They always want to go above and beyond and at every turn for customers because they love their jobs. Even when they've had a bad day with someone, either being incredibly rude or if they've been dealing with a particularly heartbreaking challenge for a customer, there is still that love for the job. And if anything, the lockdown seemed to strengthen this further, as my colleagues could see how many people in their communities were isolated, lonely, scared, without resources, and they wanted to help. So my colleagues helping Doris in this small, humbling way, I feel really strongly demonstrates the power of libraries during lockdown. So moving on from this, I may jump all over the place. I continue to talk about our lockdown experiences, and you'll have to forgive me because it's actually really difficult to draw a clear narrative line of what we did for you to follow. I feel that we achieved a lot, but it wasn't always in a straight line, and many exciting things actually happened concurrently. And I will undoubtedly have forgotten many things that we have done or achieved, and I wish I just had more time to talk about them, actually, because what you may have already seen is that I really love my job and I'm proud of what we've done this past year, so I'm attempting to cram a lot in here for you all. So the first time we shut our doors in March, we gave our staff a few days additional leave to gather themselves, take some thinking time, and to chat as teams about what they'd like to continue to deliver for their communities and also what they'd like to develop. When we shut those doors, it really was a body blow for everyone, and lots of us actually cried. I know it sounds really trite and maybe a little bit embarrassing, but, you know, we genuinely cried. And we knew we had to do it for everyone's safety. We're acutely aware of this, but we're also acutely aware of how vital our services are. And to take that away from people who really need us left us with a real sick feeling in the pit of our stomachs. And there was, certainly for me, an almost irrational thought where I thought, well, what if we close and people forget about us and don't think they need us anymore? But I'm glad to say this didn't come true. So I should also clarify at this point that none of our colleagues were furloughed and we weren't redeployed into other services. Some library services in England saw this happen, but as an independent organisation, we can set our own agenda. And our commissioners and the politicians at Suffolk County Council committed to ensuring we received our contract sum as usual. And they were also incredibly supportive of our efforts during this time. Therefore, there was no need to furlough, and we had the space to be creative, which looking back was incredibly generous and trusting from the local authority. So all of our libraries have their own social media presence. They all have Facebook as a minimum, and most have Twitter and Instagram, and one or two have very successful TikTok accounts. And I would suggest checking out Lowestoft Library's account. It currently has over 15,000 subscribers, and it's also incredibly funny and entertaining. So this is in addition to our central, more corporate comms that we have. And we wanted our libraries to build on the power of these accounts and provide an interactive digital offer that kept people engaged and connected with their local library during lockdown. And I should stress that our outsourced status has allowed us to develop strong social media presences over these past 8 years. So we were already building on a really great foundation. So the strength of our model in Suffolk is that we give over a lot of power and decision making at a local level. And we strongly believe at the centre that library managers and their teams are the local experts. So here at the centre, what we do is provide a framework of what we want to deliver, and then we hand that over. And then we're also there just to help and advise and guide as necessary. This has always been our way of working. And we knew at the start of lockdown that it would be a really wise move to continue to support teams in this way of working, just so they remained empowered and motivated. There were some absolutes that had to come down from the top, for example, from our CEO downwards. But, this was mostly about safety, COVID-safe ways of working, etc. But we also ensured that local ideas were supported and encouraged. Therefore, the interactive digital delivery offer was able to maintain that local flavour, and I think this was the secret ingredient to our success. So one of the first things I did with my colleagues was to create a menu of interactive digital delivery ideas to provide a starting point. I really wanted local libraries to use their imaginations and to create their own rich offers, but I knew that could be really daunting to start from scratch. So I just proffered this menu and said they should feel free to use this or just to spark their own imagination to come up with a menu of their own. The only stipulations we really put in place were safeguarding principles. These had to be adhered to. We're moving things online. We cannot compromise anybody's safety. The second was nothing political. Absolutely nothing political, please. But we're all used to that anyway. And the third one was, actually, I want people to share good ideas and do this freely with their colleagues around the county. And from that, what flourished was an incredibly rich offer that was differentiated, but also personalised to reflect each library's personality. Any public librarian watching this will know all too well that libraries are incredibly different. They all have their quirks and eccentricities, but that's what makes them dear to the local communities. And that's no different in Suffolk, which really is a county of contrast. You can go from somewhere that's incredibly wealthy to somewhere that really isn't. You can go from somewhere that is based on the coast and there's a lot of culture around living on the coast to something that's quite inland. So each library really is different. So further building on my point about sharing, all colleagues during this time were incredibly generous with their ideas, and we saw people borrowing and gifting all over the place. And actually, I was in a really privileged position to be able to sit back and see this happening across the entire piece. And I'm just going to quickly list a few things we delivered online during this lockdown. So we had Baby Bounce, Top Rock, story times, book groups, over 55 sessions, TikToks, quizzes, riddles, inspirational pictures to lift the mood, cooking classes, blogs, author sessions, mum's coffee mornings, choirs, STEM sessions, Lego sessions. Honestly, that is the tip of the iceberg, as the whole menu is probably about 3 pages long if I attempted to list it. I'm not saying that every library delivered all 3 pages, but a lot took a lot from everywhere. And so if you take this immense list and you times it by 44 across 4 months, you start to get a sense of the scale of our digital delivery. And the connections we made through doing this service were really remarkable. And one of the sweetest things was seeing some of our colleagues who delivered the children's activities become kind of quasi-celebrities in their towns amongst the children and parents. In fact, a colleague was actually stopped outside of a supermarket by some parents to chat as they recognised her from the videos that she had been doing, and they wanted to thank her. And my colleagues have tried really hard to personalise the services, to make it feel special for everyone watching. And again, using early years activities as an example, we would encourage parents to leave a message on Facebook with the name of their child so they could be incorporated into the hello song. So the children really felt that connection. And I just love this so much. And in fact, one of my colleagues actually included my name one day, and it actually really made my day. So while our frontline teams are digitally aware and they're very able, they still went on quite a large learning curve. And many people learned new skills, and they also had the opportunity to try new things. So working hours were not strictly structured like they would be when a branch is open. And we gave teams leeway to use their hours to suit this new way of working. We had many colleagues who were still homeschooling or taking on caring responsibilities, so we wanted to ensure we didn't add to their stress. It was really obvious that frontline teams wouldn't work every single minute of their contracts during lockdown, but we asked, as long as colleagues tried their best and adhered to the spirit of the contract and what we were asking them to do, we would be happy. And I would say something like 99.9999% of colleagues absolutely embrace this, and they worked really hard to deliver an inspiring offer. Some colleagues did struggle with the interactive digital delivery, but this is mostly due to confidence. And so some were left a little bit kicking their heels. And so what they did, we said to them, that's fine, you go and do some local volunteering. And actually that helped them maintain a sense of their own purpose. And we also use this time as an opportunity for colleagues to catch up on training. And we moved a lot of our training online. So again, working with HR colleagues and a group of my executive library managers, we provided a menu of training opportunities for people to dip into. This included the usual library training for people to catch up on, such as health and safety, GDPR, library management system, but also some more creative training, such as how to film an inspiring top rock session. And we also threw a challenge to staff at this time for them to look out for interesting online training that would add a richness to their own learning and share this with colleagues. And this included things such as having a look at FutureLearn and just coming up with ideas that they could then pass on to their colleagues. So in libraries, as you'll probably all know, things are always tight. We work to a tight deadline or a tight budget. And so we had a kind of bandwidth to undertake this kind of work and enable this kind of training. And that was really nice. And it's actually certainly really inspired me to make sure I continue to think more creatively around what training we can offer once we're back to any kind of sense of normality in libraries. I don't think it would be fair for me to gloss over the challenges during this time, especially when we were mired in the first lockdown in particular, because we didn't have an end date of how long this was going to keep going for. And this caused a lot of worry and stress for everyone. And we had to work really hard to try and keep each other's spirits up and ensure that that every colleague had someone to lean on should they need it. And also when we reopened for the first time, frontline colleagues were incredibly wobbly as the virus threat hadn't really subsided. We put into place a lot of safety measures, including PPE and quarantine books, but our processes actually took some finessing. It was the first time we've ever done this. And I would say a key learning point as a library leader is to make sure you keep staff's emotional well-being at the forefront of your mind at all times, because actually if you support that, everything else falls out into place. So of course, I've yet to talk about something quite obvious, which is our resources offer. And while our physical books were out of bounds, we have always had a very good digital resources offer. So we took the opportunity to bolster this. We have ebooks, e-audio, newspapers, magazines, music streaming, and also films and documentaries via the Canopy service, which we newly launched just before lockdown. And it's safe to say that our digital offer went bonkers, for want of a better phrase. We saw a significant uptake in people signing up for a library card and a huge shift to people using our digital services. This was mirrored across the country, of course, probably the world, but it was fantastic to see people in Suffolk still wanted and needed us in many different ways. We have always had really good digital loaning statistics, but between April and July, we saw 465,200 digital issues, which is a significant uplift. And we also received lots of feedback from our eLibrary users through social media, and this ranged from "thank you for still providing something" to "I never knew I could get all this for free." So my colleagues in the stock team had the freedom to bend and shape the stock budget during this time to support this surge in digital borrowing. Also, the Department for Culture, Media and Sport, DCMS, which is the government department which oversees public libraries, worked to secure a one-off payment for all library authorities to supplement their stock budget. It was sad to see physical buying slow down considerably, but on the other side, it was really great to see how responsive my stock colleagues were in meeting the demand. And so, like any good public library service, we're reliant on our website to draw in traffic and inform communities of what's on offer. However, our rather beautiful website was not fit for purpose during lockdown, as it really was predicated on informing and enticing people into libraries for services, events and activities. Our digital and marketing team spotted this flaw really early on and so invested time and resource into a complete website redevelopment. This had to be quick, as we wanted to keep people interested and we had to ensure we remained current. Luckily, it was quick, as the team have a high level of technical expertise in-house, and what they did was work really quickly to deliver a complete reimagining of the website, which showcased the lockdown offer. And I don't think I can stress enough what an important part of the puzzle this website redevelopment was. It provided a really important framework for what we were doing. So moving on, one service I've already touched on that I want to speak about a little bit more is our Lifeline service, which we very quickly spooled up as a response to the lockdown. We purchased 100 mobiles and SIMs using funding from our wellbeing contract, but also some generous donations from partners. This service saw lots of our staff across the library and across the libraries in the county making phone calls to library users who had requested contact. The calls didn't really have a set structure, and colleagues were happy to see where the conversation went and wandered. Some phone calls were about books, some were about the weather, which is very British, and some were just general chats. However, at their heart, all of these phone calls set out to ensure that some very vulnerable people in Suffolk had a friendly person to talk to. And I believe between the end of March and the start of July, when we reopened for browsing, colleagues made around 8,000 calls to people in Suffolk, which is a statistic that always just really blows me away. All the colleagues who took on this new service also underwent some low-key wellbeing training, first to help them establish boundaries and ensure they were keeping their own well-being in check, as actually some calls were incredibly emotive or draining due to circumstances. As a service, we've long invested in wellbeing training for all colleagues, and lockdown was no different. And in fact, if anything, colleagues were able to tap into even more support. Our wellbeing manager worked really hard to ensure that A, staff had the skills and resilience to deliver in emotive circumstances, and B, they were supported personally via a range of wellbeing resources developed for them. And I'm really glad we took this approach, as some of the stories our colleagues heard were really tough and stayed with us actually. So as a service, we gather evidence and feedback. We gather it like squirrels gathering nuts and berries, as we know how important this is, and lockdown was no different. I touched on earlier about our e-lending statistics that went through the roof, but we also religiously counted and measured what was happening online with our interactive digital delivery and also with our Lifeline service. The numbers, particularly in the first lockdown, saw thousands of people each day having some kind of interaction with our digital online offer, and the website traffic significantly increased. we recognised that the Lifeline service actually struck a particular chord, and so we commissioned some research with a professional organisation to understand the monetary and social value of the investment we had made. They analysed a 3-month period and spoke to actually many of the people who received the service, and to cut a long story short, they concluded that for every £1 spent on this, there was actually a return on investment of £4.24. And this was based on a whole range of proxy measures, such as the cost to the NHS if these people receiving the service hadn't had any contact. This actually builds on another piece of research we commissioned in 2019 for 3 of our really large services that found that for every £1 spent, the public would get £8.04 back for that investment. It's really hard to put a monetary value on libraries, as we always think it's completely obvious to anyone that they're actually priceless. But these pieces of research have been incredibly helpful in underlining that point for us. We first reopened our doors on the 7th of July last year with a new Select and Collect service, offering borrowers the chance to order a selection of books picked for them by library staff based on their interests. And since then, other services rolled on slowly, such as browsing and computer usage. However, as I said before, we've had to take steps back due to subsequent lockdowns, but actually we're now at a stage where we're welcoming back browsers into our space from April the 12th. Physical visitor numbers, especially when we first reopened, have not been what they were, and this pattern may well repeat, and we may have to take our time in order to entice people back because people are still worried, and we do have to limit numbers due to social distancing. But what's really heartening is people are finding their way back to us as they emerge into the world, and I'm sure this is only going to increase. So as it stands at the moment, of me speaking on camera to you today, we've had 3 lockdowns in England that we've had to contend with, 2 of which completely closed the doors for us. We've wound ourselves up and down many times in response to this national picture, and actually, dare I say it, we've become really slick at this. We have a differentiated model ready at all times to reflect what the government says we can and cannot do. And while I hope I never have to redeploy this ever again, I know that we're ready should we have to. One aspect of our lockdown offer, which is stuck in my brain now I look back, is actually how privileged it was in so many ways. Our main offer really was, or is, based on a presumption that people have access to the internet and they also have the requisite tech and money to pay for broadband or Wi-Fi. I'm obviously preaching to the choir, telling you how we see people from all walks of life in public libraries, including those people without means. Now, these can be people who are job seeking, people living in poverty, people who are homeless, or people maybe with severe mental illness that can cause them instability, which ultimately means that many people may not have access to what we take for granted every day. You know, people come to us because they need to use a computer or our Wi-Fi broadband to help them because they don't have that in their personal lives. And so actually shutting our doors meant we cut these people off from a vital lifeline. And the stresses of lockdown certainly extrapolated these concerns for people too. And while there was only so much we could do in the early days to alleviate this, we did work up a large-scale bid to the local authorities' COVID response fund to help people get the tech that they need. Again, to cut a very long story short, we were successful in getting this funding, which has actually paid for 100 laptops and 100 Wi-Fi dongles for people to loan from us. It's called Device to Your Door, and people can ring or email to request a device and a dongle, and we deliver it to your door via colleagues in their car. It really is that simple. We're still fairly early days, but feedback has been really positive, and actually what it feels like is we're filling a gap for people. Okay, yes, we're at the stage where we're going to start welcoming people back to use our computers, but actually some people can't come out for various reasons, so there still is that need. And a part of this service, which I feel has been a particular point of pride, is how we've worked to ensure that barriers have been removed or at least lessened for people who haven't got a library card for whatever reason. So we've worked really closely with partners who work with the most vulnerable people in our communities to ensure they can get their hands on that laptop, because let's be honest, they're the ones who need it. This is why we're doing this. And so that's been lovely. There has been a really positive legacy from the past year. And even if we're not wholly through the pandemic, we can already see how we've changed, and we want to carry this good work with us. throwing the baby out with the bathwater and attempt to get back to normality would be a complete misstep. I feel, and I think my colleagues agree, there is absolutely no point in returning to how things as they were, because what we're doing now is too exciting. We will continue to bring quality content into people's homes and thinking of positive and fun ways to bring the offer to people. While we want people back in our spaces, it's also about us making sure that we continue to reach out. So we have already redeveloped our Lifeline service into what's now called Phone a Friend, which is delivered by a fantastic volunteer force. We're also keeping our Select and Collect offer as a key offer, as we believe this supports reader development, and we've found some of our avid readers absolutely love the wildcard element of this. And then we also made the decision last December to create a new post called our Digital Activities Coordinator, whose role is to continue to gather up fantastic examples of digital delivery and package these for audiences under our main Suffolk Libraries brand. This role will continue to upskill frontline teams in digital packages and get them to try new things. And one of my favourite things is actually seeing colleagues stepping forward and working with Andy, our Digital Activities Coordinator, to try new things. And it's just a really joyful part of the job to say yes and work to enable this. So my main takeaway from delivering a library service in lockdown is probably the grit and determination from public library staff. Like I said quite a while back in the beginning, we're in this job because we love it and we want to do good things. Public libraries are one of the last free places on the high street at the best of times. So during the worst of times, we had to make sure people still knew we were there and continue to be free at the point of use. A recent report by the Carnegie UK Trust shows how successful these efforts were. It found that 1 in 3 people in the UK engaged with libraries during lockdown, despite their physical closure. Libraries can sometimes be the absolute worst at singing their own praises, but it seems libraries not just spoke up during this time, but they actually shouted. And what we want to do is maintain this noise as the country begins to reopening. So I'm sitting here, I suppose, to tell you that libraries have not just survived, they have thrived. And I believe they will continue to do so. So thank you all so much for taking the time to listen to what I have to say. I do genuinely feel humbled that I've been asked to give this seminar talk as part of your online conference events. And I feel that in many ways we have done just as all the other public library services and systems have done during this lockdown. So it's really nice to be asked. Across the UK, Ireland, Europe and beyond, I've honestly seen and heard some breathtaking stories that have inspired me and sometimes made me a little bit jealous with how ingenious these ideas, and I wish I had thought of them myself. But it's not just public libraries either. School, prison, health libraries, for example, have been performing some incredibly important work under extraordinary stresses, and I just remain in awe. So whatever comes next for you folks over in Ireland, as we hopefully move out of this pandemic, I wish you all well and look forward to hearing more. I spend a lot of time on Twitter talking about libraries and also making rubbish jokes. So come and find me, as I love new followers who are librarians. I like to chat about everything to do with libraries. And I particularly like learning about how libraries in other countries work. So I'd be fascinated to hear from you. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.